Society tells you that loneliness is your greatest enemy in old age. Accept anyone willing to give you time. What absolute rubbish. This passive attitude is precisely what leaves countless men over 65 exploited and diminished. Your wisdom and resources attract predators, not just strangers, but often those closest to you. There are 5 toxic personalities you must identify and avoid. Humans require quality connections, not proximity. Your final decades can be your most dignified, but only if you're brave enough to guard the gates of your life. The choice is yours. Look around you, who truly enriches your life and who depletes it. This isn't about cutting people off callously. It's about protecting your hard-earned peace and dignity. The first toxic personality you must recognize is the perpetual taker. I once counseled a gentleman named Harold, 72 years old, retired engineer, brilliant man. He'd built bridges that connected cities but couldn't see the most dangerous connection in his own life. His neighbor who borrowed tools weekly and never returned them, who needed rides constantly, who always had a crisis requiring Harold's time or money. It's just what neighbors do, he'd tell me, but I could see him shrinking week by week. The fundamental psychological pattern is clear. These takers operate from what Carl Jung would call a shadow position. They haven't integrated their own capacity for self-reliance, so they cast that shadow onto others, onto you, creating a parasitic relationship that appears as friendship. It's not friendship, it's vampirism, plain and simple. What makes this so insidious for men in their senior years is the underlying societal message that your value is diminished. That's absolute rubbish. But this lie makes you vulnerable to people who will exploit your need to feel useful. They'll praise your generosity while they drain your resources, financial, emotional, temporal, all resources that are frankly more finite now than they were at 40. Notice the pattern. They come to you with emergencies that never resolve. There's always another crisis, another need. They offer vague promises of reciprocation that never materialize. And most telling, pay attention here, they disappear when you need something in return. When you're hospitalized, where are they? Nowhere to be found. The biological reality is that at this stage of life, your energy is precious. Every choice about where to direct it matters profoundly. When you give to a taker, you're not just giving away time or money, you're giving away life force, the very essence of your remaining years. So what's the concrete action? You must establish clear, unapologetic boundaries. This isn't rudeness, it's survival. Start by tracking every request. Write them down. See the pattern emerge on paper. Then practice this phrase, I'm not able to do that. Not I can't, not I'm sorry, but simply I'm not able to do that. No explanation needed. When Harold finally did this, the neighbor's reaction told him everything. Anger, manipulation, guilt trips. The relationship wasn't based on mutual respect, it was based on extraction. Within a month of setting boundaries, the neighbor barely acknowledged him. And Harold, he reported feeling a physical lightness he hadn't experienced in years. So when I say avoid the perpetual taker, I'm not suggesting mild caution. I'm telling you that your dignity, your peace of mind, your very life energy depends on recognizing these relationships for what they are, one-way streets leading to your depletion. You've earned the right to protect your boundaries fiercely, not just for your sake, but for the sake of the genuine relationships that deserve your energy. The choice between being used and being respected isn't a choice at all. It's the difference between existing and truly living these precious years. Now let's talk about another dangerous personality that targets seniors specifically, the nostalgia manipulator. This person weaponizes your past against you, using shared history as a tool of control. I remember sitting across from Edward, a retired professor in his late 70s, distinguished career, respected in his field. Yet there he sat, shoulders hunched, explaining how his brother-in-law of 50 years repeatedly reminded him of a financial mistake from 1982. Remember when you nearly bankrupted yourself with that investment? Good thing I'm here to help you decide what to do with your savings now. Each recollection strategically deployed before a request for influence over Edward's decisions. What's operating here is a profound psychological mechanism that Jung and other depth psychologists understood well. Your memory, particularly nostalgic memory, isn't just information storage, it's your identity narrative. It's how you make sense of who you've been, and therefore who you are. When someone manipulates that narrative, they're not just changing your mind about the past, they're altering your sense of self in the present. This is particularly potent for men in their senior years because you're naturally in a life phase of reflection and integration. Erik Erikson called this stage ego integrity versus despair. You're working to create meaning from your life story. The manipulator exploits this developmental task, cherry-picking memories that diminish your sense of competence and autonomy. Watch for the pattern. They selectively recall your mistakes but never your triumphs. They emphasize times they rescued you. They create what psychologists call false dichotomies, suggesting that either you follow their advice now or you'll repeat past failures. And critically, they respond with immediate disapproval when you challenge their version of history. The biological impact is measurable. When subjected to this manipulation, your cortisol levels rise, your blood pressure increases, your immune function decreases. This isn't just emotionally uncomfortable, it's physically damaging at a time when your physiological resilience is already challenged. So what's the concrete counter strategy? First, reclaim your full narrative. Write down your life achievements, professional and personal. Create a document of times you made excellent decisions independently. This isn't egotism, it's truth-telling to yourself. Second, practice this phrase, that's one way to remember it. Not argumentative, not defensive. Simply acknowledging their perspective is subjective. Then add, I remember it differently, without feeling compelled to justify your version. When Edward began doing this, his brother-in-law's influence rapidly diminished. The magic of the manipulation dissolved when contested. Within weeks, the brother-in-law stopped visiting altogether, revealing the relationship had never been about companionship, only control. So when I say avoid the nostalgia manipulator, I'm telling you to guard the very story of your life. These people don't simply waste your time, they attempt to rewrite your identity, positioning themselves as the heroes and you as perpetually incapable. Your life story is yours to tell. The narrative belongs to you, and at this stage, properly honoring your journey, including both struggles and triumphs, isn't vanity. It's the essential task of creating meaning from the decades you've lived. No one has the right to distort that for their benefit. I worked with Michael, age 83, widower, retired business owner, comfortable savings, beautiful home. He mentioned how his late wife's niece suddenly appeared in his life after 15 years of no contact. Weekly visits, bringing casseroles, organizing his medication. She's been such a blessing, he told me. Then came the suggestions, perhaps he should add her to his accounts for convenience. Maybe update his will to include her since she's doing so much now. Classic predatory pattern. What's occurring psychologically is an exploitation of what developmental psychologists call generativity, your natural desire in later life to contribute to future generations, to leave a positive legacy. It's a healthy, normal impulse. But these hunters pervert it, creating a transactional relationship disguised as familial care. The detection signals are unmistakable. First, the timing. Where were they when you were recovering from surgery 5 years ago? Second, the artificial acceleration of intimacy, excessive terms of endearment, family references, creating false urgency. Third, and most revealing, their curiosity about your financial matters exceeds their interest in your actual life story. The neuropsychological impact is severe. This manipulation triggers what scientists call cognitive dissonance. You sense something's wrong but resist acknowledging it, because the alternative, being alone, feels worse. This dissonance creates neural stress that impairs decision-making precisely when you need clarity most. The practical defense requires courage. First, maintain absolute privacy regarding financial matters. No exceptions. Create a verbal boundary. I don't discuss my financial arrangements. Practice it in the mirror if necessary. Second, consult with a trusted financial advisor and attorney, preferably ones you established relationships with before this person appeared. Third, and most critically, test the relationship. Request something that requires authentic care but offers no financial benefit. Ask them to drive you to a medical appointment at 6 a.m. or help organize old photographs for a personal project. Their response will reveal their true motivation. When Michael finally tested his niece-in-law this way, her excuses were immediate. 3 weeks later, when it became clear he wouldn't modify his estate plans, her visits stopped entirely. The abandonment hurt, certainly, but far less than the exploitation would have. So when I talk about avoiding inheritance hunters, I'm not suggesting mild caution. I'm telling you that protecting your legacy, the resources you've worked decades to build, isn't selfishness, it's responsibility. These resources represent your life's work, and they deserve thoughtful, deliberate allocation based on your values, not someone else's manipulation. The final chapter of your financial life belongs to you. Its direction is your choice, perhaps to family who truly care for you, perhaps to causes that reflect your deepest values. But that profound choice must remain yours, free from predatory influence that masquerades as sudden devotion. I recall James, 71, former civil engineer who built infrastructure across 3 states. Sharp mind, articulate, engaged with current events. Yet at family gatherings, his son-in-law would cut him off mid-sentence with, "That's old thinking, Dad, or the world doesn't work that way anymore." I watched James speak less and less at each gathering, his contributions to conversations withering under this constant dismissal. What's happening psychologically is an attack on your fundamental human need for dignity and recognition. William James, the father of American psychology, identified this basic requirement to be acknowledged as a person whose perspective matters. When someone consistently dismisses you, they're not merely disagreeing, they're denying your very personhood. For men in their senior years, this dismissal carries additional weight because it connects to societal narratives about relevance and value. Our culture, with its worship of youth and novelty, already suggests that wisdom accumulated over decades somehow depreciates rather than compounds. The dismisser amplifies this cultural lie, reinforcing isolation within your own social circle. The pattern appears in multiple forms: interruptions when you speak, condescending explanations of topics you understand perfectly, what's now called mansplaining, but directed at seniors, eye-rolling or sidelong glances when you offer an opinion, or the particularly insidious technological dismissal, assuming you can't comprehend digital concepts because of your age. The neurological impact is significant. Research in neuroscience demonstrates that social pain, the pain of dismissal and rejection, activates the same brain regions as physical pain. This isn't metaphorical, it's biological. When consistently dismissed, your brain experiences genuine trauma that affects cognitive function and emotional well-being. The counteraction requires strategic assertion. First, name the behavior in the moment. "I notice I've been interrupted 3 times while trying to share my perspective." Not accusatory, simply factual. Second, reclaim your expertise confidently. "Having worked in this field for 30 years, I've observed that." Third, align with allies beforehand. Identify family members or friends who recognize your value and can reinforce your contributions. When James finally confronted his dismissive son-in-law calmly, directly, something remarkable happened. Not immediate change, but gradual adjustment. Once the pattern was named, it became unsustainable. Within months, their dynamic shifted. The son-in-law began asking questions about James's experience rather than talking over him. So when I talk about avoiding the chronic dismisser, I'm telling you to protect not just your feelings, but your cognitive health and social vitality. These individuals don't merely annoy you, they diminish your sense of self at a time when maintaining identity is essential for psychological well-being. Your perspective, shaped by decades of experience, remains valuable. Your cognitive processing may differ from younger generations, but different doesn't mean inferior. It often means deeper, more contextual, more nuanced. Protect your right to be heard, to contribute, to matter in conversation. That's not entitlement, it's the basic dignity every human deserves. Now let's explore the final toxic personality you must recognize and avoid: the false prophet. These individuals present themselves as gurus, financial wizards, or spiritual guides with exclusive access to guaranteed solutions for your most pressing concerns. I worked with Robert, 68, recently retired physician with a substantial pension. He described meeting a financial advisor at a senior seminar who promised 15% guaranteed returns through a special investment only available to select clients. This advisor claimed credentials from prestigious institutions, displayed testimonials from satisfied clients, and created artificial scarcity. This opportunity closes next week. Classic predatory tactics aimed precisely at seniors. What's operating psychologically is an exploitation of what sociologists call status anxiety, the fear of diminished standing that often accompanies major life transitions like retirement. These false prophets identify your deepest uncertainties about health, wealth, legacy, meaning, and position themselves as having exclusive solutions that the establishment doesn't want you to know about. This manipulation is particularly effective with men in their senior years because you're navigating genuine existential questions. You're confronting mortality, questioning your impact, reevaluating beliefs. These are profound, legitimate inquiries. The false prophet offers deceptively simple answers to complex questions, replacing nuance with certainty, reflection with reaction. The warning signs are consistent. First, they create artificial urgency. Act now before it's too late. Second, they isolate you from other advisors. Don't tell your regular financial advisor about this special opportunity. Third, they leverage testimonials from people you cannot verify or contact. And fourth, most telling, they cannot clearly explain how their miraculous solution actually works. The cognitive impact is measurable. Research in neuroscience shows that uncertainty activates stress responses in the brain. The false prophet exploits this biology, first triggering anxiety about your future, then offering relief through their exclusive solution. This neurological manipulation bypasses rational analysis, targeting primitive brain functions. The defensive strategy is straightforward. Never make significant decisions without a mandatory waiting period. I recommend 72 hours minimum. Consult established, credentialed experts with verifiable track records. And critically, maintain this universal standard. If someone cannot explain precisely how their solution works in terms you can understand, that's not sophistication, it's deception. When Robert finally applied these filters, the opportunity disintegrated under scrutiny. The credentials were exaggerated, the returns impossible, the urgency manufactured. By implementing this simple waiting period, he protected his life savings from what authorities later identified as a fraud scheme targeting seniors. So when I emphasize avoiding false prophets, I'm telling you to protect not just your finances but your intellectual sovereignty. These individuals don't merely waste your time or money. They attempt to rob you of your capacity for discernment, your hard-earned wisdom, your right to make informed choices aligned with your actual values. Your judgment, honed through decades of experience, remains your most valuable asset. True experts welcome questions, acknowledge complexity, respect your intelligence, and never rush your decisions. Guard your right to think critically against those who would bypass it with miracle solutions and artificial urgency. That vigilance isn't skepticism, it's wisdom in its purest form. Your relationships in these golden years are not a matter of convenience but of survival. Every person you permit into your inner circle either elevates your existence or diminishes it. There is no neutral exchange. The 5 toxic personalities we've examined, takers, manipulators, inheritance hunters, dismissers, and false prophets, aren't merely unpleasant companions. They are active threats to your dignity, resources, and remaining years. Consider this fundamental truth. Chaos increases naturally in closed systems. Your life, with its finite energy, requires vigilant protection against those who would extract value without contributing meaning. The alternative is not merely discomfort but a gradual dissolution of everything you've built, your autonomy, your legacy, your very sense of self. Ask yourself this: have you been valuing mere presence over genuine respect? The quality of your final chapters depends not on how many surround you, but on whether those few truly see you. Stand guard at the threshold of your life. This isn't isolation, it's discernment in its highest form.